Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum and a very good morning to all of you. First and foremost, Alhamdulillah, thank you for joining this session today. And today we are very grateful to have one of our most prominent academicians, that is Associate Professor Dr. Fauziah Abdul Rahim. Assalamualaikum. Dr. Fauziah, how are you?
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I'm fine, thank you. Alhamdulillah.
Okay, thank you for accepting our invitation to share some of the things which is very important in the assessment, that is rubric. And before we start, I would like to introduce to all of you Associate Professor Dr. Fauziah is the Dean of School of Education and Modern Language, UUM, and she is also one of the prominent academicians in alternative assessment. Recently, she has given several talks to us in PSM, and she's also the recipient for Anugerah Academic in 2018, Applied Art and Social Science, and she also received another academic for teaching and learning. And today we invite her to share some of her knowledge regarding a rubric for student assessment. I know that nowadays, after we have come through for the past 2 months on how to do online teaching and learning, so it is time that we need to look into how to assess the student. So that has been covered in this our second phase. And most important thing in assessing student is how do you develop rubrics if you are trying to assess the student, and also you are developing rubrics in order for you to have a criteria that you can measure their performance. And today we will be looking into that, and the topic will be rubric for student assessment. And before I hand over this session to Dr. Fauziah, I would like to remind that if you have any thoughts or comments and also questions, you can post in the chat, or afterwards when we have a question and answer session, you can just unmute your mic. But at the moment, please mute your mic so that we give Dr. Fauziah ease in presenting her topic, and as well as to smoothen the running of this session. So with that, thank you again for all of you for joining, and I hand over this session to you, Dr. Fauziah.
Thank you. Let me share the content here. Okay. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good morning to everybody. Thank you, Dr. Shah, for inviting me in this to share a bit of my practices. I'm not an expert in assessment, but as instructors, we do assess our students, and what I'll be sharing with you will be just the practices and what I understand, and what we should be doing when we're developing a rubric and assessing our students. So basically, this is a sharing session. And yes, there will be a Q&A session at the end. So if you have any questions along the presentation, just take note or put it in the chat, and we will revisit later. Yeah. Okay. Without further ado, let's begin. So welcome aboard, everybody. This is an online training, Alma. And it's on the 13th of May, and I kind of like going to UMT, and I do have a very special place in my heart when it comes to UMT. But this time it's going to be online. I'm here in Kedah, very well, very much so in Putra. And all of you are everywhere. And I sort of saw somebody from even Bumi Pinyalang. So welcome everybody and thank you for joining us. Okay, when we're talking about rubric for students assessment, what we will be looking at for this particular morning or this session will be what is rubric, just to make sure that everybody is clear about what is rubric. When people say rubric, what is that? So we will deal with that. That's the first session. And then in the second session, where we will look at when, why and when do we use rubric. So basically, it's recording students' performance. And there are many other ways of recording students' performance other than rubric, which I'm going to touch very superficially. So I just give you a quick understanding of other tools that we can do other than rubric. And then we will look at how do we develop a rubric, what are the considerations, what are the components that you need to consider when you want to do or when you want to use rubric in your assessment. And finally, I will give you some examples and also examples from my own practice, how I use rubric in my classroom. And then at the end, we will have a Q&A session. Let's start with the first session. When people say rubric, what do they mean by that? There are lots of terminologies. I remember working with people in the entrepreneur field. They use a different term, but we were just talking about rubric, but they didn't understand that the term that they use is actually rubric. So if you've got a criteria and that criteria describes something, and you want to see whether that criteria or you want to evaluate based on that criteria, then you are actually basically talking about using rubric. Yeah. So in an overview, it is a criterion-based description of students' expected performance in view of the intended outcome, and it's linked to a scale. So when you write the qualities, it looks as if it's qualitative in nature, okay, right? But those qualitative characteristics can be turned into quantitative when you give them a score. So that's why there's a scale from low to high, yeah, for evaluating students' observed work. So if you look at how rubric is actually used, so in terms of student assessment, that's where you want to measure students' performance, and especially it is used when you're using alternative assessment, meaning very unlikely that very unlikely that you will be using hello. Okay, very unlikely that you'll be using a rubric in your final exam. But because what's the point of using a rubric in the final exam when you already have an answer key? You've already got one answer that you would want from your students. So that's where you want them to actually provide those answers using a time frame, a specific time frame, so that they can actually deliver. So rubric is not suitable in those kind of situations. Rubric would be suitable for assessment that requires them to do projects, requires them to do other ways than the paper pencil test. Yeah, maybe even those teaching dancing or public speaking. So they will have to observe students' performance, which you cannot do in a paper pencil test. So that's where you've got to use alternative assessment. So when you're using alternative assessment, you have to use rubric. Right. And when you're using rubric, you can actually, actually not just rubric, okay? In any kind of assessment tool, there will be strengths and weaknesses. Final exam, there will be strengths and weaknesses too. We basically want students to regurgitate information. How they think is not measured. But when it comes to, or how they feel is not measured. But when it comes to rubric, there's also strengths and weaknesses. So in terms of its strength, There are various types of rubric that you can use, either holistically or analytically, and both can be used to validate evidence of learning. And it can be suited from even preschool to tertiary level. Of course, the background that I'm showing, if you're using all these smiley faces, it's suitable for young children. But for tertiary level, of course, not that it's not encouraged, but surely you will have specific characteristics that you would want to consider rather than the smiley faces. However, when you're using rubric, the weakness will be difficult. It's difficult to come up with a good quality rubric. I know people struggle to come up with rubric. I struggle coming up with rubric too. But having said that, it is not impossible for you to come up with a good rubric suitable for your course if you know what you're looking at. Okay? If you know what you want to measure. So we need to understand now a very quick understanding of what is rubric. In terms of its scoring, it does provide qualitative description when evaluating students' performance based on a range of criteria. A rubric can be done for any content area. If you're saying that I'm teaching medicine, how can I use rubric? You can, especially if you're asking them to do PBL. Definitely, you will be using some form of rubric. Or if you're saying that you're teaching engineering or any field for that matter, any discipline for that matter, any content area, you can actually use rubric, especially so if you're measuring knowledge and especially so skills, which you can't usually measure in the final exam. So that would be the scoring guide. It provides the qualitative, and yet those qualitative descriptions can be turned into a score. Right. In terms of how it should be given, or maybe how it should be handled, I would advise that when you have rubric, you should provide the rubric in advance to your students. Meaning, on the first day of your class, when you apart from giving them the course outline and describing and motivating your students, you can already give them the instruction of the project that you're going to do, or the assignments or the alternative assessment that you're going to be using, and you can provide them with the rubric for each of those tasks. Because if you provide them with the rubric, that will give them, the rubric is not an answer. The rubric is just your expectation about what you want your students to achieve. Of course, I think all good instructors, they would want their students to do well, right? Especially when you're talking about outcomes-based education. By default, because it is outcomes-based education, you have already, it's like an akad, you've already basically have a contract with your students that your students and you will somehow or other at the end of the course achieve those learning outcomes. So giving the rubric in advance is actually good because it provides the expectation for the students. It gives them the criteria that you will be judged. But mind you, based on my very, very long, not very, very, sounds old now, very long experience of teaching, I realized that sometimes students don't even bother looking at the criteria. The rubric, so that's why you also need to do formative assessment. I'll tell you what the do's, not the do's and don'ts, but some tips about how to make sure that the students actually go through the rubric. So going back to the expectation, what do I mean by expectation? Because the rubric will be developed or designed in such a manner that you provide the standard, and the standard is actually mapped to the student's level of expertise. Meaning, based on what they do and based on the assessment that you provide, or maybe their peers provide, or they self-assess, they will know and they will indicate whether uh, they are actually at the novice level or at the advanced level. So if they are at the novice level, if you're doing formative assessment, as I said before, so they know that they need to improve a lot. They realize that, oh, hang on a minute, I haven't got the number. You know, if you arrange in such a manner that there's a 5 scale rubric, 5 meaning very good, very excellent. If they've got 3 and they are very concerned about how their performance are, they will be very enthusiastic and motivated to know how can they improve themselves in order to get 5. Okay? And this again based on my experience, even if you really explain the rubric to your students through activities in the formative assessment and let them go through that, they actually even the couldn't be bothered students would actually be how should I say, motivated by other students when they see other people are actually improving and they're still stuck at certain level. Okay, the final thing is that rubric is actually very suitable for authentic assessment and alternative assessment. Therefore, it is authentic in nature too, because the kind of criteria that you want to consider will have to depend on the kind of not only the task but also the learning outcome and the skills that's actually connected to the learning outcome, and because of those combination of the task and authenticity of the task and all that, it can actually provide an authentic criteria, if I may say. Yeah, so mostly employed in alternative assessment and is measured according to authentic criteria. Okay. Right. Remember I said that apart from rubrics, there are also other types of tools that you can actually use in order to record students' performance. I know Dr. Shah used to ask me whether I can talk about checklists and anecdotal. I have not used checklists and anecdotal before, simply because it is not suitable for my course. But perhaps if I were the one who's teaching in hotel catering or tourism, what do we call it, hospitality, and you've got certain procedures that you would want your students to follow when they make up the room, for example, if they're in charge of the housekeeping, or if they're in the kitchen, there are some rules that they need to do. So you can actually use checklists, because checklist is very clear cut. What are the observable behaviors that you will be looking at, and all you need to do is just to tick. So if you look at the image on the left, basically a checklist will look like that. In fact, to a certain extent, this one is actually where you have to write, so the information is not written, but the information is already written. It's a matter of you doing it or not. Or if you can remember when you first learn how to drive, or you go for your test, your driving test, that is actually an example of checklist. Right. The next is written anecdotal. So anecdotal notes you can actually have 2 ways, either written or mental. And people who do qualitative research will understand what I mean by anecdotal, because it's basically like how you collect your field trip notes. Yeah. So written anecdotal records are just like your field trip notes, where you write the note on observation of students' performance. But the only thing is it's time consuming to write and interpret, just like qualitative. But the information is actually very, very rich. Yeah. If I can go back to checklist just now, because it's already indicated what are the observable behaviors, so it's very quick to administer, but it lacks the information of performance quality. But then again, as I said just now, if you're just looking at whether they do it or not, So you don't really need to explain the quality of the performance. But if you really need it, then you probably need to change from checklist to rubric. Mental anecdotal notes. They basically, mental means you remember, and usually good instructors over the years of them teaching, they are actually doing mental anecdotal notes. When they are teaching, and after their class, they will write it down. Then from the mental, it changes to written. So mental anecdotal notes is also easy to conduct because you don't have to write anything, but easy to conduct, also easy to forget, because it all depends on how old you are as well. So, and what recipe you like. So, and worse still, there's no solid evidence. After if your class is in the morning, after lunch, you probably would have forgotten what happened. I mean, really, really significant things that has happened. So, no solid evidence. So now we are ready to go to the next part, which is why and when do we use rubric. So these are just notes that you can consider. Again, there are probably other consideration, but I think these are the I wouldn't say main, but the probable consideration that you would have. Yeah. So the first thing is having those kind of rubric is actually, I mean, especially when you give the students in advance. And remember, I said it's about providing them the expectation, your expectation of what you expect from the task and from them completing the task. So it is like scaffolding their learning. It's like somebody is actually telling them, if they ever read the rubric, it's like as somebody actually telling them, if you do this, you're going to get a score of 3. If you do that, you're going to get a score of 5. You don't do it at all, you're going to get 0. So it's like, it's as if somebody is actually providing this guidance of what exactly do they need to do in order for them to achieve that standard. So that's why it is crucial, to give the rubric in advance. So don't be like some people, they say, oh, the rubric is, it's a secret, you cannot tell them how you're going to assess. So that's not what outcomes-based education is all about, and definitely not what a rubric is designed for. The only thing that is a secret is your answer key when you're doing your final exam. Yes, that one you do not give in advance. You keep until the day you got the script. But when it comes to rubric, you have to give them in order for you to know, or them to know, what is the standard. And the thing about having to give them in advance and going through a few rounds of formative assessment, it's actually very, very good because it helps both of you to, number one is for both of you to understand, I mean the students and you to understand what you expect from the task. But the other thing is the next thing, increased quality. It helps the instructors to actually focus on what is it that I'm measuring, what is the emphasis, what is the attention of the criteria that I have set for this particular task, so that you don't go off on a tangent. So sometimes, we ask them to do, I'll give you an example. If you are asking them to do a task on presentation, but you are asking them to use technology, Web 2.0 tools. If you're not clear about your course, you are teaching English language, for example, you're teaching language. If you're not clear about what is it that you are measuring, you might give marks for the use of Web 2.0 tools when it's not actually related to your course learning outcome, just because you're too excited about things. Yeah, so that's why it is important for you to also understand the rubric, because the rubric actually will give you some indication of what is it that you need to focus. And of course, when you are able to give it to your students, they are able to understand, as I said just now, what will be evaluated, and they will be able to exemplify better, the evidence of learning. And the best part of while you allow your students to do formative assessment, sometimes, especially so when doing also based on my experience, sometimes when you develop your own rubric, you didn't have time to validate, or because that's the first time, especially when you're teaching the course for the first time. So it's when you're doing the formative assessment and you're getting feedback from students, and you realize that they didn't understand certain criteria that was set in there. That helps you to improve the rubric and the students to understand what you want. Yeah. And this actually increase the quality for both parties, for you to improve your ability to actually develop rubric, and for your students to also give the feedback. Yeah. Okay, the final product, instructors would know what makes a good final product and can provide clear justification. So what I mean by clear justification is the evidence. Like just now when I said about the mental anecdotal, you can't remember and you cannot provide the evidence. When you have a rubric, it's easy for you to know why you gave, why your students did badly in certain things. Certain students did badly. You have something to fall back on. You have your rubric that has got the criteria, and you've already indicated in that criteria what they were able to do and what they were not able to do. And people who want to audit your let's just say, I wouldn't imagine that the auditors are that hardworking. But if they want to do that, if they say, okay, give us 3 of your assessment, students' work, and you want to look at how you assess the students and you want to validate, even if they do the audit trail for how you evaluate your students, you don't have to worry because it's all there in your file, right? Every student will have, or every group or every student will have their rubric that you have actually indicated. Right, and finally, student development. Having the standard, for students and understanding, and when students understand the quality in which they will be judged, and they have a clearer idea of what needs to be done, it will improve their quality of work and increase their knowledge. Remember, I told you about the students, even those students who couldn't be bothered, or maybe they're motivated students. If you provide the rubric, as I said just now, again, this is based on my experience, when they look at their friends getting better and better at the performance, and they're still stuck at a certain level, they will begin to ask you why their friends are improving and they're not. As an instructor, that's the best moment of your life, because you have somebody who initially in your class is passive, but now taking charge of their learning. So the day that they're asking you, why is it that I'm still at level 2 when my friends last time he was at level 1, now level 4? What's wrong? What's wrong with me? Are you being biased? Let them say whatever they want to say, and you explain to them what they need to do in order to improve. Because in the long run, when they see their own self-improvement, they will appreciate learning, and that's what you want from your students. Okay, this is the part where we're going to spend longer time, because this one is where we really look at how to develop rubric. So this is part 3, yeah. So what is the process of doing the rubric? Some people, what they do is they don't know how to do the rubric. They start looking at it in the internet. They start Google. They ask Mr. Google or Miss Google, whatever. And they download that rubric and they use it in their classroom. But if you are actually teaching language, and it's public speaking, so it's basically when you're talking about public speaking, it's generic. But if you are teaching educational psychology, or you're teaching thermodynamics, I don't think there will be any rubric available online. especially so if your course learning outcome is very related to a certain kind of context, because I'm sure the courses that we have will be in line with the mission and vision of our university. So different universities will have different courses, even though they're doing fishery, but I'm sure different universities have different perspectives, different approach of teaching the program. So, and because of that, the courses are different. And that's the reason why I think you have to learn to develop your own rubric. Yeah, and in order for you to do that, what you have to do will be initially is to actually observe. I mean, you've got to be very, very sensitive to how your students perform and what are the criteria. Like you have to observe examples of students' performance, which means you are trying to benchmark your students. You want to be able to distinguish between the low performance students and the high performance students. Because when you're doing that, then you're already establishing the criteria. Remember I told you about the criteria that you have and the levels and the standards. So that's why you need to observe first. Next is for you to classify. You classify the examples of the sensitive categories, meaning what are the tasks and what are the course learning outcome. What are the tasks that you want them to do? What are the categories that you have indicated? And usually it's very common to have extreme good, middle. Middle would be like meeting the standard, and lower would be like below standard. And that's why basically that will be the main arrangement. But of course, the scale could be 3, could be 5, could be 7. That's up to you. Right. So in terms of you classify the examples into sensitive categories that represent varying levels of performance that meet the standard. That's what I mean by low, meeting the standard, below standard, meeting the standard, and exceptionally high. So when you are able to classify, then you are able to do the next step, which is indicating the standard. So those who have clearly acceptable performance, or some people actually say they have exceptionally met the standard, so you can have at one end. So if it's a 5-scale kind of a rubric, that will be 5. Borderline performance will be just meeting the standard. So some people will actually say that's meeting the standard, borderline performance. That's 3 usually. Yeah, if it's a scale of 5, 3 will be the borderline performance, and clearly unacceptable performance will be below the standard. So in between will be neither here nor there, but almost there. So they can do this but cannot do that. Something of that sort. So once you've already done the observe, the classify, standard, next will be to design the rubric. Yeah, you design the characteristics based on each standard category, and then of course, once you've already designed the characteristics, the next is actually to write the statement. You've got to define the characteristics that distinguish between the various categories. Meaning, if they are exceptionally able to do something, what are their behaviors? What is it that they are able to do? Yeah. So if you're going back to your course learning outcome, let's just say your course learning outcome is explained, then 5 will be, how did they explain their ability to explain? So how well did they explain that they deserve to get exceptionally good marks, which is actually 5, and so on and so forth. And if they are not able to open their mouth, then unfortunately it will be 0. Of course, as good lecturers, we will actually encourage them to say a few good things. Right, so you write statements that define the characteristics that distinguish between the various categories, and then you are ready to now present your rubric either in a holistically way or in the analytically way. So when you're designing your rubric, there are 2 types of the general 2 types of rubric. Of course, there's one in between. The two general type of rubric will be holistic and analytic. Yeah, I will talk about that later when we come to that. So this is just to give you an idea of what are the processes that you would go through if you're developing your own rubric. And of course, when you're doing teaching and learning, you know after you've completed your the at the end of your semester, whatever, never forget to do continuous policy improvement. So the same thing for doing rubric. After you have used it, you've got to see whether was it done well, you know, and that's where you can actually do the validity and the reliability processes. And I'm sure Dr. Adiba, as I was told, that Dr. Adiba from UTM will be actually sharing with you about how to go about doing the validity and reliability. Because in any tool, you need to look at the validity and reliability of the tool in order for you to know if ever I'm using the stars and the this particular way of doing it with this particular rubric, no matter who the students are, I'm able to distinguish the different levels of the students well. Yeah? Right, so the rubric is used for assessment, then evaluated for its use, and of course quality of measurement, and then revise criteria accordingly. So sometimes you will realize some of the rubrics are vague, that your student seems not to be able to get it, to get good marks for that. And that's not the fault of the students, but it's more of the fault of when we are doing the rubric, we didn't understand exactly what the criteria are. So that's why testing the rubric for a few good times, testing it in different cohorts. So if you're lucky enough to actually teach the same course consecutively, then you are able to do the validity and reliability even better. Yeah. So the things that you need to consider when you are developing your rubric will be, of course, without fail. I think if anyone who has been following my training or sharing sessions, you cannot run away from the course learning outcome. So the minute when people give you the syllabus, number one is for you to understand the course learning outcome. If you do not understand the course learning outcome, it's going to be difficult for you to identify the criteria that I mentioned just now. The criteria is the thing that's very important when you're doing the rubric. There is a need to understand the levels of the taxonomy. So in terms of the cognitive, what is the level? If there's an effective, what's the level? If the course learning outcome is measuring psychomotor, what's the level? What are the learning clusters? Now they call learning clusters. Last time we call it what did they call it? Basically it's soft skills, yeah. The other soft skills that you or graduate attributes that is actually mapped to your course learning outcome. So if let's just say your course learning outcome is also mapped to ethics, then you need to know what exactly are you measuring in terms of ethics. What is the characteristics that you are actually measuring in relation to the task and in relation to the course learning outcome. Okay, the next thing that you need to do in order for you to prepare the task, you need to also look at the course learning outcome in relation to the topic. Now, I'm sure like all syllabus, if you look at your syllabus again, you will notice that it's designed in such a manner that you've got topic, and then it's also assigned to certain course learning outcomes. I mean, if you've got 4 course learning outcomes, it will be spread in the topics related. Yeah. So the topics will be related to the course learning outcome. So this is the thing that's very important, because if you decide to use the second course of learning outcome, let's just say you've got 4 course learning outcomes, and the second one is the one that you're going to use rubric, you need to look at all the topics that's related to the second course learning outcome in order for you to understand or maybe gauge the kind of task that would be suitable in relation to the topic. So they have actually covered the topics. You have actually given them the formative assessment that's looking at the course learning outcomes. So now they are ready to do the final project. Yeah. So that's why you need to also look at the topics that's covered with the course learning outcomes. Then the next step is actually to think about the task. What is it that you want them to do? And if you are using Rubric and you know that Rubric is actually related to alternative assessment, if the task is not engaging and meaningful, you have not done well. So you got to make sure that the task that you're asking them to do is actually engaging. Engaging means they really like doing it. And it's meaningful. That's actually more important. When it's meaningful to them, they become engaged, in doing things. So the task has got to be meaningful. It's related to the real world context. They can see the application of what they're doing in the classroom to the real world. So that's where their motivation will come in. So the task has got to be engaging and meaningful, and if possible, not if possible, when they're actually engaged and motivated, you can see the evidence of learning. Yeah? You can observe the evidence of learning. Right. Next is for you to know or to be clear what is it to be assessed. Yeah. Once you've already done, you know already what are the tasks, you know which topics has got to be covered, you know what's your course learning outcome, so you're ready to do the assessing date, which means you know what's clear, what is it that you're actually measuring, yeah? What criteria that you're actually measuring. So if you're talking about course learning outcome, basically you are measuring their ability to. So if it's explain, students' ability to explain. If it prepare, students' ability to prepare. If it's demonstrate, I'm talking about the verb, yeah, the verb in the course learning outcome. So if it's demonstrate, so it's the ability for them to demonstrate and so on and so forth. So it's looking at what are the criteria in relation to the standard, yeah, the various categories as well. Then the next thing is for you to decide whether it's going to be holistic or analytic. So the types of rubric created will depend on the various aspects. So if you want to do it holistic, the template will be different. If you want to do it analytic, the template will be different because it's designed for different purposes. Yeah. And finally, remember I told you about letting your students have a go with the rubric. What I mean by having a go with the rubric is that when you give them the rubric on the first day, and then you give them series of formative assessment tasks before you actually give them the summative task, when they are doing that formative task, they are actually learning to understand better about what they need to do. So you can actually ask them to use the rubric either to self-assess themselves, or if they were to swap, or exchange with their other group members, they can actually have peer assessment as well. So the rubric can be used for self and also peer assessment, and getting feedback from students, from various people, and even reflecting their own improvements is actually very good for student development, yeah? Especially when you want them to become adults. Now I'm going to go into the different types of rubric. We've got the analytic rubric as well as the holistic rubric. So when we basically, if we are talking about analytic rubric, when do you want to use it? When you are sure, whether you want to use analytic or holistic, the first thing is you've got to understand the course intended learning outcome. But once you have made the decision to use analytic, then you know that when you are sure of the students of the characteristics needed for assessment, then you use analytic. But if you're not sure, because it's open, it's very there's no one answer, then that will be holistic. So analytic, you are very sure of the characteristics that you want to assess. You use analytic. The second thing that you will consider is it is actually suitable for problem-solving activities. Analytic, yeah. Analytic rubric. I'm looking at this left side of the diagram. So if it's analytic, it is suitable for problem-solving activities. Meaning, if you want them to solve problems, the task is encouraging them to solve problems, then using analytic rubric is better. And of course, when you have a clear standard and characteristics, you know what exactly you're measuring, as I said, as I've mentioned before. And the best part of using analytic, I wouldn't say best now. I mean, analytic and holistic also are very good. But when you're using analytic, see when you say 5 means they are able to not just explain, but explain in relation to the theory and connect it to their own context. 3 is when they are able to explain. 1 is they can only explain a bit, and some of the explanations are not correct. The theories that are used are not maybe there's misconception. So what happens when you give them the indication where they are? It's not just about getting the score. If they actually read the characteristics, the criteria that you have actually indicated, they will know their strengths as well as their weaknesses. And because of that, they know how to improve. Okay, so that's the analysis. When it comes to the holistic, as I mentioned, the word holistic means it's the holistic perspective of assessment. So there's no one fixed answer. So when you are using or you're giving a task that do not have a fixed answer, then having a holistic would be better. And you are able to give them feedback, yeah, as you deem suitable. And even if you are giving feedback, it's going to be overall judgment of their performance. It's not specific characteristics of their performance, but overall judgment of their performance. And when you just want to give an overall feedback of your students' performance in terms of what they can do, then holistic will be the right type of rubric to use. So again, if I can repeat this, there are two general types of rubric. It's called analytic rubric and holistic rubric. So analytic rubric is suitable when you're very clear of what you're looking at, and it's suitable for solving problems, and students are able to see their strengths and weaknesses. Whereas holistic, because of its holistic nature, you are actually providing your overall judgment to their performance. And so what they are getting is what they can do, yeah, rather than the weaknesses as well. So this is an example of analytic rubric. So if you notice, at the top is where the standards are. Yeah, remember I told you from the novice to advanced. So they start with the beginning, developing, accomplished, exemplary. So that will be the standard. So 4 exemplary, 1 novice or beginning. And at the side is where you have your criteria. So remember I said never forget your course learning outcome. So your course learning outcome will come here. It's not exactly the same word, but because it's actually the verb is actually explained. So you know already. Let's just say the CLO is explained. So the first column here will be explaining what. The what is actually related to the task that you want them to do. So this is where your course learning outcome will be. Perhaps if the course learning outcome is related to different parts, yeah, like cognitive, affective, psychomotor. So each aspect will have its component, yeah, in the rubric development. And if it's related to the skills, same thing. Okay. So that's why analytic rubrics utilize a grid that provides specific levels of achievement. This is the grid, providing points for each criteria. So in each of these criteria, there will be description of what they can do. So if it's exemplary, description of identifiable performance characteristics reflecting the highest level of performance. If it's accomplished, description of identifiable performance characteristics reflecting mastery of performance. If it's developing, description of identifiable performance characteristics reflecting development and movement towards mastery of performance. So this will be like, okay, this is good, this is like very good, brilliant. Beginning will be description of identifiable performance characteristics reflecting a beginning level of performance. When you're talking about beginning level of performance, that's where you're going to tell them what they can and what they cannot do. Similarly for developing as well as the rest. But of course, when it comes to exemplary, surely there will be no weaknesses. You will be saying, you can do this, you're able to connect this, you're going to have all the positive things in the exemplary because to really indicate the standard. Right, this is one new, I wouldn't say new, but another way of some people are actually using this. It's kind of like combination of holistic and analysis, where you will have the criteria, but you also will have the standard. But the difference is it's not analytic. It's blank. You don't put anything there. But even if you want to put it there, that's fine. But usually people won't. They just tick the column, yeah. But they will have to do qualitative written comments, yeah. So if you are teaching small group class, it's okay for you to use this. If you're teaching, a big number of students in your classroom, I don't think this is manageable and feasible. So this is another example of a single point rubric. That's the reference. So see concerns, areas that need work. So you're actually providing feedback, yeah. Feedback of what you want them to do. If you want them to give more, you want them to advance and provide evidence of exceeding standards, you are able to do that. So basically, you are saying that this is the standard that you want, but this person is able to not only do this, but also able to show whatever. So by writing in this column, you are providing clearer evidence of why you think this person should deserve more marks than 95. If 95 to 100 is actually excellent, and 80 to 95 is the meeting the standard, and 0 to 80 is below standard, or maybe average. Right, this is the example of holistic rubric. So you see, you don't have to write anything. You've already got the descriptions, and you've got the score from 4 to 0. So all you need to do is just to circle the score. Okay. And so the holistic rubrics provide feedback for an overall judgment of students' work, as I said just now. So this is just an overall feedback. If the students got 4, they know they have. You will have the description here why you think people who get 4, they're able to do what. Yeah. So basically, they will know what they can do because they've got the score. Yeah. So it's different from the analytic where you actually show you can do this, but you can't, especially for the ones lower end. Right. If you're asking me a long time ago, how did I measure or maybe not measure them, how do I know what to measure? in relation to the soft skills, because we've got lots of soft skills like the social responsibility, ethics, and leadership and whatever. So long time ago, we had this ICGPA, right? So they also provided as example of rubric, but I didn't take the whole chunk of the rubric, but I used the attributes to help me understand what are the components that I am actually measuring, and I pick and choose which one I think that will be relevant to my course and which one I need to add and expand because it's related to the task that I gave and related to the course learning outcome. So remember, even if you're taking it from other people or using it from the guidelines that's provided, you still need to tweak it or adapt it so that it's actually suitable for your context. Okay, but of course, soon there will be noble guidelines. So in the noble guidelines, there will be the new MQF 2.0 skill, so you can actually refer once it's actually distributed to everybody. Yeah. So that's how I measured. But remember I keep saying about understanding the course learning outcome, including the soft skill, because when you're developing the rubric, it's still related to that. And the assessment, when you're talking about assessment, is actually having the not only the task but also the tools to measure. So that has got to be aligned to the course learning outcome. So make sure it is always aligned with constructive alignment is always there. Yeah. Okay. To those who have actually seen this before, I apologize because it's not easy to come up with a new one. So I'll just use based on my experience and based on my evidence. So remember I said about course learning outcome. So this particular course learning outcome is C3A5. So I know the cognitive level is level 3 and the affective is level 5. So understanding that and looking at the topics that's actually covered. So the topics is actually related to these subtopics that I'm teaching. And this is actually the topic, the course that I was given was social cultural theory and learning. So the topics were involved or maybe related to this particular course learning outcome is introduction to social cultural theory as well as reflexive work. So and in total 9 hours of 42 hours were actually designed for this particular course learning outcome. And remember I told you about the formative assessment that you actually give your students to have a go with the rubric. So for my formative assessment, I gave them parts of a movie that they have to actually watch, and then they answer the question, solve the problem. What was the, remember, look at that, then solve the case. The case is actually asking the students, why did the teacher decide to change his teaching method? Because in the for society, the teacher actually changed his teaching method. What was the problem? How does this action help the students? So they are actually trying to relate all this, whatever that's happening in the movie, by connecting it to the social culture theory. And this was a group work, and students were, once they have completed, they were asked to exchange, with the other group members. So while they were doing, remember I told you that my students, and I am actually teaching postgraduate students. These are postgraduate students, teachers who are actually teaching, okay? But they also don't look at their own work. So what did I do? I asked them to do this particular task, and when they actually, while they were doing it, they were just doing it without even looking at the rubric. It's when I say, okay, this week you're going to mark your friend's work. So everybody needs to exchange, the group members will have to exchange. Then only they start looking at the rubric and they say, when did we get the rubric? Yeah? And one of them will just say, oh no, from the first day it was given. Oh, I didn't realize that. And while they're doing it, I can actually, I'm telling you now, I'm sharing with you, it was total silence because it's not just about them reading the students' work. It's about them reflecting what error they did, or what things that they have not done in their work, and they know the students are going, I mean, their friends are going to give them feedback, which is not peace to their heart. So that is in itself is a learning process. Number one is actually to understand that they have a rubric. Number two, to understand what the rubric wants, not actually what the rubric wants, sorry, what the task wants, and how they're going to get, the standards from the rubric. And this process is very important because this is the formative assessment. I'm not giving them any grade. I gave them, the friends gave them their score, because they got less than 3. I think on a scale of 5, almost everybody got 2, between 2. I think I would say it's average of 3. Maybe average of 2, not even 3. So they were very disappointed, and they asked me a lot of questions. They were asking me like, how do I relate? So they realized that they don't know how to relate the social cultural theory to the task. And the reason for not being able to do that is because they didn't read in the first place the theory. So it's like a whole process of realizing that in order for me to do this task later on when I'm doing my summative assessment, I got to make sure that I know the theory, because understanding the theory makes me now be able to see the connection between what I watch in the movie, the episodes in the movie, and how is it related to the theory. So that's how they learn and they reflect self-improvement and self-assessment as well as peer assessment. Because after the class, I did ask them, why are you all very silent? And we were reflecting our error, our all the sin that we have done. So when I asked, what do you mean by that? And they started saying, I didn't read, number one. Number two, I thought it was just watching a movie and having a go, and it's just a fun activity, not realizing that, yes, although it is a fun activity, but you need to do a lot of thinking too. So it's only when I gave them the summative assessment, which is a different story altogether, and this time, for the Dead Poet Society, I actually give them snippets of the story of the whole movie. It's not the whole entire movie, only certain chunks of episodes. But when it's the whole entire movie, they have to come up with their analysis, and so I give them instruction of what they need to do, and that's when they now begin to understand better at what they were supposed to be doing. Yeah. So let me share with you. This was the. I'm sorry if I know some of you actually asked me some slides. I can give you the slides, but some of the information here I will have to start thinking whether to actually provide or not. So this is related to our teaching and learning policy improvement. So anyway, so this is the first CLO, and as I mentioned just now, this CLO is actually related to the social. These are the soft skills, and this is the instruction that I want them to do, and I've given them the template of what I asked them to do, and this is actually the rubric. Remember, I told you the top is actually the standard, so excellent, good, average, weak, very weak. Average here means they meet the standard of doing a master's level, at the master's level. But if they have done excellent, and if they scored excellent, that means they are very well ahead, beyond the requirement of the program and the course, because this is second year. We will take this particular course. Okay, so these are the areas of evaluation will be the criteria that I mentioned just now. So what exactly we are talking about here, and insight here will be what I expect them in relation to the task. Right. I have come to the end, basically, because I think this understanding all that, I would like to hear maybe question and answers so that we can actually do some form of discussion. Yeah. But as what Dr. Shah mentioned just now, there will be rules and regulation, I guess. So let's unmute and discuss. But of course, you have to take turn and only unmute if it's your turn. And you can use the chat if you want to. So I'm going to open the chat now. And yeah. And the host, if I miss any of the questions, please let me know, yeah, because I might not be able to have all the questions. But I'm free to do the discussion now.
Yeah.
That's what I mean.
Dr. Fauziah, there is about 2-3 questions, but earlier part is from Dr. Zatul Ifah.
Okay.
About 10:27 AM.
Okay.
Adakah rubrik ini berjaya dilaksanakan sekiranya kebanyakan pelajar tidak set standard quality assignment or communication etc. dengan rubrik yang diberi? Dan penerangan tentang rubrik telah diterangkan pada awal semester.
Adakah rubrik ini berjaya dilaksanakan sekiranya kebanyakan pelajar tidak set standard quality assignment? Apa maksudnya? Dengan rubrik yang diberi, penerangan tentang rubrik telah diterangkan pada if you're talking about pelajar-pelajar ni depa yang tak ada hati, macam I kata tadi, not bothered, the not bothered kind of students. Sebab itulah kena bagi formative assessment tadi ni. You have to give them activities that make them do it and see their processes, their transformation. Yeah. Kalau itulah soalan dia, saya tak nak faham kalau mereka tidak set standard quality. I presume kalau student tu yang tak set standard quality assessment disebabkan dia orang yang tak kisah ke, ataupun dalam soalan ni berkenaan dengan pelajar tu yang bersama-sama dengan pensyarah untuk nak set quality assignment tu. Which is this?
Dr. Zatul, if you're there, can you respond?
Kalau ada, have to respond terus. Kalau tak, okay, let me answer both aspects. Ideally, kalau pelajar-pelajar you memang dah biasa dengan rubrik, penggunaan rubrik, you can actually negotiate with your students. You can negotiate with your students and okay. Dr. Zatul Ifah, if you want to ask, the best is for you to tell me what is it that you want me to, what question, what do you want me to, how do you want me to respond to that? Did I get it wrong? Okay. Macam tadi lah I kata, kalau your students have already done using rubric many times, you can actually negotiate with your students, you know, by asking, okay, this is the task that I'm going to do. What exactly would you actually, how would you give me some feedback on improving this particular rubric, or, you know, what aspects that you need to do. But they have to understand what is it that you're measuring. If this question is about them, you're getting your students on board when you're developing your rubric, that's fine if your students have gone through many times of doing using rubric and they are able to give you constructive feedback, you know, rather than critical feedback, rather than just wanting, alah doktor bagi je lah 5, tak payah gaduh, tak payah ada 1, 2, 3, 4 tu, semua 5. Kalau you have that kind of students, then you have got to just explain to them why you design the rubric in such a manner from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because each of the standards has ada maknanya, they have meaning, yeah. So that is if you're talking about those kind of negotiation. But if you're talking about students who are not bothered tadi ni, kalau mereka tak kisah, sebab tu cara dia ialah untuk nak mengkisahkan mereka ialah you have to give them some activities in the classroom as a formative assessment where you will be using the rubric or they will be using the rubric. Example that I gave in my class, the same rubric that I'm going to use for the summative assessment was given to them when they were doing their formative assessment. And I know my students, like everybody's students, they don't even look at the rubric. They tak kisah pun. Masa kita hantar dekat mereka, we gave them a whole entire information about how they're going to be assessed this semester. They didn't even read it. But it's okay. It's only when they do the formative assessment that they realize, okay, I can't do it. And they were just like, was just enjoying themselves doing things without looking at the quality and expectation of the standard that you want from the task. So they were just doing it. But when they have to now give feedback to their friends, yeah, they are actually looking at their friends' work. But the silence is not because they were looking at their friends' work. The silence that I got when I did that was because they were now reflecting, alamak, I didn't do this, I didn't do that. This one cannot lah. In the rubric says you have to have A, B, C, D. This one has just got A. You cannot have 5. So A, 1 will be what? 2. So start thinking lah. Yeah, I think we will have the same problem. So they were reflecting their. That's why they were saying we are reflecting our sin. To them is the sin because things were already given to them, but they didn't even look at it. So now they know that once given the rubric, that the standard is already, the expectation is already set. If they know how to use that particular rubric, they can score. They can. I do hope I'm answering your question that is actually far.
One more, Dr. Fauziah, is about by Dr. Farah Wong.
Okay.
About 10:54 a.m. On the fifth process of rubric preparing process.
Okay.
You can present holistically or analytically. What is the rule of thumb to use holistic or analytic?
So okay. If you're on the fifth process, all right. Whether or not you want to use analytic or holistic is this these considerations. If you are if it's really an open-ended thingy, not open-ended, it's a very generic kind of thing. There's no specific characteristics that you're looking for. You're just giving them an overall perspective of their performance. Then holistic will be a good way of providing them the feedback. Because remember, holistic only focuses on what they can do. But if you're very, very clear about what exactly are the characteristics that you want to measure, and especially so if you are asking them to solve the problem, then it would be better to use analytic because you and the students will know how to what will be the expectation of the task. Am I answering the question? Well, remember I showed you the the next question was, or both in combination, is there any rule of thumb? If you want to consider using the single point rubric, this will be the combination, especially so in the next one. Sorry. Yeah, this one. This is also the combination, kind of like combination, because you do have the criteria, but you need to also provide the information, yeah, especially this one. So you do have the standard, you've got the criteria, but you also need to provide the generic overview of what needs to be done. Yeah, so this will be the single point rubric. But as I mentioned just now, if your class is a big class, it will be difficult. In the end, you will just say very good, not good. You know, that's not good feedback. Feedback is when you can tell them exactly what you like. You know, it's like, you know, I like when you say this. Perhaps you can do that. That is a good feedback because the students are clear about what they need to do, rather than very good, excellent, brilliant. Sekali-sekala in the classroom is okay, but when you're using it in a rubric like this, if you want to use a single point rubric, especially when you're writing comments, what is expected here is for them to know how they can improve or what great things that they have done. So this is to write down what great things that they have done. And for you to know and justify yourself as an evaluator that they deserve more points because they've exceeded the standards. For those who have actually fulfilled the standards, this is it. And the reason why it's holistic in nature because there's a big gap between 80 to 95. So I can give 93, you know, it's not a really clear cut exactly why I gave that particular score. Whereas if it's analytic, if I give you 4, 3, 2, 4, that's the score. It's very clear. The total marks will be based on where I put the score for which section. Okay. So basically, if you want to use both, or you want to use analytic, or you want to use holistic just now, it all depends on what's the nature of the task and what are the characteristics. Whether you want it to provide, and what's the reason for giving that a particular assessment. Is it to give your overall judgment of the performance, or you want to be specific to measure specific criteria? So measure specific criteria will be analytic, and holistic will be overview. Any more questions?
Yeah, Prof. Starting from 11:07 a.m. by Dr. Lim and the rest. There are a lot of questions there.
Okay, open book test. Okay, for open book test, open book exam is rubric not preferable. Okay, sama pun test kan? If you're talking about test, definitely got scheme of answer key lah, because it's test. But if you're talking about project where they have to do it, then that's where you have to design the rubric, because a certain project has got certain things that you want, certain criteria that you expect from the students. When it's test, whether in the hall or at home or whatever, it's still a test. A test, you must have an answer key. Just looking at the question, example of take-home test would be almost similar to the essay questions that you have, except that a good take-home test will connect it to the context in which they are in, so that will avoid them plagiarizing and copy pasting from the internet, because they have access to all those things. But you've got to connect it to the context. But chances are you will give marks, right, for doing all those things, rather than having a rubric. Okay, 11 minutes. That's Dr. Lim. So that's for open book test, open book exam. And answer key or marking scheme would be preferable to me. Yeah. Hi, Doctor. Could you please briefly explain on formative and summative assessment? Okay. Formative assessment is basically for you to, is an avenue for you to give feedback to your students, and at the same time find evidence of learning, right? And for your students, it's an avenue for them to improve, because before they do actually will be assessed, really assessed. So when the minute I say that, what I mean is, when you're giving them formative assessment, you don't give them you give them the score, but that score is not going to be included in your 100%. Whereas summative assessment, nama pun summative kan, usually it's done at the end, yeah. So if you're talking about final exam, clear cut, summative assessment. But because the nature is actually giving at the end, where there is no negotiation, like there's no way for them, no negotiation means here, what I mean by negotiation here means there's no room for them to do the improvement. It's after they do the test, that's it. They're going to get a score, and that score is going to be kept. Will be considered in their 100%. That will be summative assessment. So if your course is 100% coursework, don't think that it's formative assessment, because formative assessment means no score. You're going to give a score, but you're not going to take the percentage. If you say that, but my course is 100%, it's a coursework, but in week 2 I will have one task, week 4 I will have another task, in week 3 I will have another, week 12 I will have one project, and the final week I will have another project. That's what we call continuous assessment. You continuously assess the students, but it's all summative assessment. So it's 20%, 20%, 30%, 30%, 100%. Okay, but in between, before you give, ideally a good instructor will always have at least one formative assessment before the real summative assessment, because you need to give them, you need to teach them. If you are measuring ethics and you have not in your entire life taught ethics, you've been teaching your content, you've got no time to teach ethics. How are you going to make sure that your students understand what you're measuring if you do not give them that opportunity to do a task? So that's why formative assessment is crucial for you to do, so that your students, you can still give the score. As I mentioned just now, the students were receiving the score, but of course from their peers. But that score is not, I'm not going to take those score and put it in the 100%. And that is working with postgraduate students. That's fine, because postgraduate students are quite malu lah kot, to do unethical things. But if you have undergraduate students, they're very cheeky. The minute you ask them to swap group work, you bagi 5 nanti I pun bagi 5 dekat you. And that's when you start asking them. When the minute they give 5, that's where during your debriefing, after you ask your students, okay, that group, what score did you get? If all of them got 5, all you need to do is just to ask them to give you justification of why they deserve that 5, looking at the characteristics that you have indicated. Where that 5 says you have to do A, B, C, D. Where in your work that you have done 5? That process is the tarbiyah process. And that is when you're going to teach them. Now, it's no point cheating yourself, because at the end of the day, you deprive yourself from improving in learning. So that's where you have to guide them. Yeah, they're just being cheeky, but they will soon learn if you really explain to them. Okay, I hope I answered that question. That's formative and summative, ya. So formative maksudnya you bagi dia punya pentadbiran tu, tapi dia punya task tu macam assessment macam tadi tu, I gave them the Deep Poet Society. That's my formative assessment. Because when I give the summative assessment, it was another movie, different movie altogether. Okay? And that's just to improve themselves. Okay. Satu soalan ni, saya pernah rope in the students to develop the rubric, and from there it's also formative kan? No. Actually, I'm not sure. But basically, when you rope in your students to help you to develop the rubric, that's very good. But that process is not formative, because you're not measuring your students, right? You're just negotiating with your students about how to improve or how to develop the rubric. So that's two different things. But doing asking your students to give you feedback on how to look at the rubric is good, because at the end of the day, it also allows them to know what aspects that you actually need to, or they need to do. They need to improve. But of course, you must be clear of your course learning outcome too. Don't be carried away with what your students suggest. Yeah, because your students can suggest all easy things and all good things. So you need to be clear of what your course learning outcomes are. And you have to also every time when they try to digress you to a certain, path, you always go back to your course learning outcome and you tell them, but this course is about this business, and the whole reason of us introducing this particular topic is so that when you go out there in the real world, you will be able to do this. So while you're doing that, while you are negotiating, you are negotiating about the rubric, but in actual fact, you're making them understand why they're taking the course. That's also very crucial. I think Dr. Wei Bonyap tanya, dalam satu rubrik form, adakah mungkin untuk masukkan sebahagian ciri rubrik analitik dan holistik? Yang tu saya dah katakan, kalau nak campur dua-dua analitik dengan holistik, there will be the single point tu lah. Maksudnya dia akan ada kriteria, ada juga standard dia 1/5. But at the same time, you are providing them the generic, the overall perspective, overall judgment. So kalau you tak pernah guna any of the rubric, buatlah satu-satu dulu. Try holistic dulu. If once you are clear about your course learning outcome and you know exactly and it's actually relating to the task, and the task is actually problem solving in nature, then eloklah guna analitik sahaja dahulu. Bila you dah very comfortable using rubric, then you can start even combining the two. That would be good lah. It helps us to bring this session together. Okay. Yeah. Dr. Nazila, I think I have actually explained what are the differences between formative, summative, and continuous assessment, right? Okay, antara analitik dan holistic rubric, yang mana lebih bagus yang sesuai bagi tahap pembelajaran? Contoh, bachelor dan master. Dia bukan kira level. Dia kira, macam saya kata tadi tu, apa sebenarnya yang kita nak daripada menggunakan analitik rubric ni. Kalau dia nak menyelesaikan masalah, if it's actually solving problem activities, then it's best to use analytics. But if it's just a generic way of doing things, kriteria dia tak banyak, dia macam very specific saja, very generic saja, then you can actually use holistic, because apa yang you nak, when you're using holistic rubric, you are providing the overall judgment. So you are actually showing students what they can do. Whereas analytic, because it's solving the problem and you have a specific criteria, so you want your students to meet certain standards, and based on the characteristics that you have indicated in the criteria, then what your students will get is actually not only information about the strengths, but also their weaknesses, what they can do and what they cannot do yet. So they need to improve in order for them to be able to do better. Okay? So having said, remember I told you in the very beginning, daripada rubrik ni digunakan daripada prasekolah sampailah tertiary level. Maksudnya dia bukan kisah pasal level, dia kisah tentang dia sebenarnya nak measure apa dan digunakan untuk apa. Alright? Dan cara penggunaan template dia pun mungkin berbeza lah. Kalau pada kanak-kanak maybe it's going to be smiley faces, but for adult lebih spesifik lah. Okay, if we set the rubric based on the quantity, bilangan case study yang perlu diterangkan, pelajar dapat masa penuh sebab bagi maximum mark in terms of quantity. Tetapi in terms of quality, the way pelajar explain, dia tak layak untuk dapat berapa mark. So, bagaimana kita perlu bagi 10 mark untuk pelajar? Okay. Sebenarnya you nak measure apa ni? You nak measure adakah dia punya CLO tu bilangan case study yang dia dapat selesaikan? That means dalam CLO tu memang dia tulis dekat situ solve many cases in the field apa-apa ke? So kalau dia boleh solve many cases and you've already indicated that 10 is excellent, 5 is meeting the standard, less than 5 is below standard, then betul lah you boleh guna rubric. Tapi kalau you nak measure karakteristik tadi tu, cara dia selesaikan masalah dalam case tadi tu, so that will be analytic and that analytic must be and the criteria must be related to the CLO, must be related to the what you want them to do in the case study. Like in my case, I want them to solve the problems and connect it to the theory. So in terms of the cognitive level, I'm going to look at their ability to explain in relation to connecting to the theory and explain what's happening in the movie as the case study. So that's how I measure the two, the two. So kalau dalam CLO you memang dia cakap tentang ability to solve many cases, then it's okay for you to combine, dia punya cases tu. Tapi kalaulah bukan itu dia punya CLO, but the CLO is actually about, macam saya kata tadi, ability for them to solve the case, it's not the quantity, then daripada dia buat 5 cases lagi banyak lagi bagus, baiklah you guna 2 case sebagai formative where you sit down and discuss about why they didn't score, or you tell them why they think they didn't get a good mark based on how they solve the case. That would be better rather than asking them to just do it and giving them a score without explaining how they can improve. How to clearly differentiate the 2 intermediate performance, 2 and 3 as normally the other 2 extreme 1 and 4 are clearly justified. Yang itu, that one is up to you. That's why I said you usually will have the 5, 3, 1. In between tu dia macam nak bagi 5, ada benda yang dia tak buat lagi. Yang tak buat lagi tu yang you kena tuliskan. You have to write it down. What is it that you're still not satisfied, that they cannot get 5. If they do this, they cannot get 5. How do you know? If you're asking me, how do I know? How do I know in order for me to differentiate? That, remember I told you about observe the processes. Yeah, the first thing you need to observe based on your students' normal performance. So why did you give, when you were doing your when they did certain tasks and you didn't give them full mark? Why didn't you give them the full mark? If you're giving that task in a form of alternative assessment again, but this time using a rubric, maybe before that you were just giving them a score, ikut parti je kan, out of 5 you nak bagi berapa? That will be kind of like a holistic assessment. So if you now can tell us the reason why that person got 3/5 or maybe 4/5, that's where you can actually helps you to develop the rubric in order for you to determine the in between, the 2 and 3 and all that. Okay. Ada tak contoh rubric paling ringkas untuk MOV kebanyakan kami ni? Paling ringkas I susah nak cakap sebab dia kena tengok you punya CLO. Kalau you nak template dia senang je. Kalau you nak buat apa? Skala 5, dia punya kolom tu kena ada 6 lah kalau you nak campur dengan dia punya karakteristik. Kalau you dalam CLO you tu ada beberapa, katalah ada 3 ke 4 elemen yang you nak tengok. Yang elemen yang kelima ialah tentang task tu, which is still related to the CLO. So you ada 5, tambah je lah 5 belah row So that's the basic template of an analytic lah. That's an analytic. Tapi kalau you nak buat holistic, all you need to do is just to identify berapa markah yang you nak bagi, katalah 0 until 4 tadi. So 0 means dia tak buat apa, 1 dia buat apa dan dia tak buat apa, 2 again buat apa tak buat apa, 3 no, sorry, delete. If it's holistic, it's just basically 1 means apa dia yang dia boleh buat, 2 apa yang dia boleh buat, 3 apa yang dia boleh buat, 4 apa yang dia boleh buat, 5 apa yang dia boleh buat. Holistic only focuses on what they can do. It's the analytic that also talks about what they can do but they cannot do. Contohlah. Yeah. So holistic will be just what they can do. So whoever can do that, can do certain things, they will get higher score compared to those who cannot. Yang tu. Cuma kalau you tanya dekat I, macam mana nak tahu apa yang letak dekat nombor 4, nombor 3, nombor 2, nombor 1, nombor 0, rasa-rasanya I akan kata apa? Go back to your PLO. That's where your standard is. Yeah, that's where you the way in which you should measure. Okay. There is a debate about MCQ to assess higher order thinking. What is your opinion? Okay, Dr. Nazila, as I need to caveat here, yeah. My field is educational psychology. Dalam educational psychology, kami kena belajar semua termasuk assessment. So, assessment is not my cup of tea lah. I'm just practicing it. So, if you're asking me whether dalam MCQ, they say that you can assess higher order thinking, to the best of my knowledge and my training in education, MCQ can be used for level taxonomy 1 sampailah ke 6. Betul. But to come up with C6, which requires them to create, you must be very, very, very clever to come up with the options. You know, when you have questions, you've got STEM and you've got your options kan, ada A, B, C, D. Kalau MCQ ni dia ada A, B, C, D. Kalau jawapan tu tak apalah. Jawapan tu pun satu hal, tapi tak apalah yang tu jawapan. It's the other three yang kita panggil distractors tu. Yang itu yang also memerlukan kemahiran yang sangat tinggi lah. Sebab you kena pastikan distractors tu bukan clear cut distractors. Kalau clear cut distractors, sekali pandang pun dah tahu dah jawapan dia whatever. So you got to make sure that this distractors is actually a good distractor. It's almost the same as the answer, but not the answer. Macam itulah. So if you're asking me whether MCQ can be done for higher order thinking, answer is can. Okay, do you have a suggestion or good reference for developing Rubric for laboratory work assessment? Oh, I don't know, because I don't use labs, but to my understanding, it doesn't matter whether it's a lab or observing people or observing behavior, as long as it's observable, rubric, the standard rubric is still applicable. The notion of the rubric development is still applicable. It's just that when you're talking about lab work, what is it that you are actually assessing? Is it procedures? If it's procedures, is it procedures yang very clear cut? Maksudnya ada 1, 2, 3, 4. Kena buat number 1 before number 2. Number 2 kena buat sebelum number 3 and so on and so forth. If that is the case, then you don't even have to use rubric. You can actually use checklist. Yeah, you don't have to use rubric. But if there are certain characteristics, bila dia ada ciri-ciri yang you nak lihat, dia bukannya kalau dia punya cara-cara dekat dalam lab tu, number 1 kena switch on the button, number 2 kena buat apa, number 3. So that can be a checklist. But if you want to see you want to say kalau dia nak masukkan masalahnya ada bertahun-tahun tinggalkan lab work ni masa zaman tingkatan 5, tingkatan 4, tingkatan 5 dulu, so I can't remember. If you're talking about chemicals, you know, how you turn the chemical, how you sway the bottle or the beaker and all that, then you probably need rubric, because there are certain criteria that you are actually assessing rather than procedures. If it's procedures in the lab, you know, when you're talking about lab work, there's procedures in the lab, procedures sesuai guna checklist. But if you're talking about characteristics, ciri-ciri yang you nak lihat, then you have to do rubric. Tapi rubric dia tak payahlah macam tadi ni yang very analytic. You could actually use holistic rubric, because it's giving you an overall perspective of what they should do, they can do. Yeah. When is it more suitable to use combined analytic and holistic single point rubric? When you want, to me, if you're using the single point rubric, if you are teaching a small group classroom, you want to give them comments that sometimes you have not thought of in the characteristics, or in you know, it's considered as a characteristic. That's when you use single point rubric, where you still have the standard 1, 2, 3, 4. You have the generic criteria as good as a holistic kind of rubric, but you also want to give them feedback, yeah, or comments, or indication that they have done certain things that you find good, or something like that. Yeah. So, but remember I said, if you have time to actually write, that means you are teaching a small class lah, maybe less than 20. If you're teaching more than 50, I would suggest rubric that either holistic or analytic, that you can actually just, you know, circle the mark, you know, or just tick the indication. You know, like for example, the one that I showed you, I can't remember where it is. Yeah. All I need to do, because I have this at the score, all I need to do is to write the score at the end for each of my students. That's not that bad. Some people don't have that score, they just tick inside here, inside the column yang mana yang relevant. Yeah. So basically, if you're talking about single point rubric ni, if you have time lah to write down all this, then go ahead and do it, especially if you are teaching small classroom. Yeah. Asking students team to come up with quiz questions from their peers for a certain topic, is it advisable to make it part of the summative assessment? If you find that they have asked good questions, why not? That's interesting too. Because students, you'll be surprised. Actually, sometimes we often think badly, negatively of our students. But in actual fact, when you give them empowerment, you know, to start learn, they can come up with even better questions sometimes, I think, in my view. Okay, what is the strength of combination of continuous assessment? Quiz assignment and final exam instead of continuous assessment. Okay. What is the strength of combination of continuous assessment, quiz assignment, and final exam instead of continuous assessment? I don't know, because it all depends on how your course is designed. If it's a 60-40, that means that course requires students to actually show their ability to master the content. That's the reason why they have final exams. But if your course is 100% because you want them to have, it's more of hands-on, kind of the nature of the course is more of hands-on, then continuous assessment is called for. But also remember, yeah, this is, I think it's quite universal. You know, when people say you've got the coursework and the final exam, so you've got 60/40. So the final exam is clear cut, right? You either it's MCQ or a short answer question or even an essay. But the minute you give quizzes for your coursework, contoh, you've got 60/40 and you've got quiz 1, quiz 2, quiz 3, one project, and one presentation. So in total, if you have quiz, 10, 10, 10, plus the 40% that you have for your final exam, in actual fact, you have about 70% of the course is actually memory based, you know, regurgitating based, mastery based. So again, go back to the course, the nature of the course, the nature of the program, the outcome that you want at the end for your students. What kind of students do you want them to be? Are they required by the certain board, you know, board of accreditation? So all these must be considered. If they are not bounded by that, then avoid having quiz 1, quiz 2, quiz 3, and the final exam. The coursework is where you should be using a lot of alternative assessment. So that's where the chance for the students to actually develop their soft skills rather than their memory. Okay, break aside, students at times don't follow the format for the particular task. Their final report may be good, but didn't adhere to the format template. What to do in this situation? Well, if you have not given them the instruction well in the beginning, the kind of format that you want, obviously they will come up with a different kind of various types of format. But if there is a clear-cut indication of what the format is, then you will not have this problem. And that's why in my assessment, as I showed you, the task that I was asking them to do is pretty much, I'm sure it was something that was new to them. So I had to give them an example of what I want them to, the template that I want them to do, so that I don't have any problems with templates. I just now can concentrate on what they understand, rather than being bogged down by the different formats that they're doing. But having said that, I'm one of those who are not really bothered about format. It's more of the content that is more important. But if you are very concerned about format, then from day one you need to show them what you want, the kind of template, the kind of instruction for the template, so that you're not hassled by that. Okay, sometimes students don't follow format. Would it be ethical to deduct marks as they have been briefed earlier to follow the format? As long as you write down somewhere in your instruction, like in my case, I will have if in all the assignments they will have to send it via Turnitin. So if they have more than 12%, I think, if I remember, 12%, I would not mark their not one grade down. I think every time there's a range, it will be one grade down. So they will understand that because again, during the formative assessment, when I do ask them to write certain tasks, also submitting it via Turnitin, and if there is a high percentage of plagiarism or similarities, they call it, I will give them appropriate marks as I mentioned in my instruction. So when students appeal or students ask me why did I get low when I think I did it well, the reason why they're very confident that they did it well because they know they got it from a very good source in the internet. So I will tell them, I will actually show them the source that they have actually taken it from. So that's when they understand the instruction that I've given earlier. So it's all about making them clear about what it is. Yeah? If you take the format seriously, Prof. Ali, then you got to make sure that you let them do it, and then you tell them if you in the formative assessment, during the formative task, you tell them this is your grade. And when they discuss with you, why did I did not get well, I do well when I answered it very well, I answered it correctly. In the textbook, it's also written that I can remember all this verbatim. Then you tell them, didn't I tell you from day one in this particular do's and don'ts in my classroom? Number one is to make sure you come to class, whatever. And number 4 says that you need to follow the format, and the format is as such. You've got to follow the standard format. Then that's when they learn, their mistakes, and at least if you want to deduct marks, then you have ethically done it well, because consciously your conscience are clear. You have already explained to them, and you want to deduct marks. But of course, you've got to be careful, If your course is connected to ethics, go ahead and do it. Because, or maybe not ethics, maybe leadership. Go ahead and do it, because it all boils down to them understanding the connection between, being a leader on their own, to understand what they need to do as a learner. Then you can deduct marks. But if your course has got nothing to do with all those things, and you want to deduct marks, you've got to have clear justification in terms of why that is such. So what I'm trying to say here is, even if you want to deduct marks, it cannot be more than 2. For practical dance class, and the CLO is to execute. For practical dance class and the CLO is to execute advanced dance technique, how could I set the rubric? Because in one dance exercise, it normally comprises complex mix of different techniques. To list down what they must achieve, the description is very long. If I need to explain each of the technique one by one, it's difficult to description certain process. Okay, even if they're executing advanced dance technique, surely the technique is what you want, right? So if you can't possibly, then if you think that it's just too many, the characteristics is just too complex, and doing analytic rubric will put you off on a ballistic mode, then at least have the generic technique. That means even if you are an evaluator, if you are a judge, how would you evaluate that dance? So surely there will be some indicator, right? That is the indicator is actually the thing that you should put in your rubric, and perhaps your rubric perhaps you would consider in that situation, because there's just too big a scale, you think, perhaps you should consider holistic rather than analytic, because but whatever it is, you have to have some form of indicator. If not, how can you give them marks? So the fact that you can give them indicator to give them the marks means you can still do the rubric, whether or not it's analytic or holistic or single point. That's where your consideration comes in. Can I do it feasibly in a classroom? Is my class less than 20? Feasible for me to do the single point rubric? If so, go ahead and do it. But if you think that, I've got about 50 dancers to dancers to actually observe, or 100 dancers to observe, I cannot possibly do single point rubric, then holistic.
Prof, there's one question above it by Dr. Nizaha.
I missed it. Yes. What is it?
Sometimes
a task project requires several lectures to do the evaluation, and each of the lecturer has their own level of standard. At the end, marks given are way too far from each other. Okay. Very good question. The minute you have more than one person teaching the same course, there must be one penyelaras khusus that will be appointed. Am I right? I think that is a standard operating procedure in all institutions of higher learning. The minute you have more than one person teaching the course, one of them must become the head, the coordinator of the course. Now, you have to have a meeting in order for you to be able to decide on the task. The only difference is how you teach, but how you assess, it must be the same. You cannot say, oh, I've got 60% leeway of doing whatever kind of assessment that I want, and 40% that all of us must do because that's the final exam. No, wrong. When it comes to assessment, all of you must agree upon the same kind of assessment for all your students so that the standards are the same. Okay, that's rule number one. Rule number two, after you've already executed that assessment and you've got their students' response, student scripts, or students' project or task, you now have to sit down, and the coordinator's job is actually to get two low, two medium, two high, photocopy it, pass it to all the friends, the colleagues around them and teaching the same course, and now grade based on the rubric that you have set. Okay, that's what we call the moderating procedure, the norming session. You've got to moderate your marks because you need to know. That's why you will not have this problem lah. Yang tadi tu, apa tu? Everybody will have their own level of standard. Correct, true. If you don't do the moderation, my A will be someone else B, or their A will be my B. So how are we going to make sure that we are all talking about the same language here? When we're talking A, this is the example. B, this is the example. C, this is the example. It's when you do the moderating. So,
anchored to Bluetooth.
Okay, anything else that I missed? I think everybody dah tired dah kot kan?
The bottom one
The bottom
by
one,
Associate Professor Dr. Ali.
Yeah, what is that? Yang mana?
Okay.
Mine.
Which one? By Dr. Jaratin. Is that allowed to assign rubrics for assessing midterm or final exam?
Itulah. When you have an exam, maksudnya you've already got an answer, right? So you don't need rubric. You need answer key. Rubric is when you have alternatives, when you give them projects, problem-based learning, case study, project, service learning, or when you are measuring soft skills. So if your exam measures soft skill, rubric lah. But I'm sure our final exam and our midterm do not measure soft skill. It measures only knowledge. Habis tinggi pun cognitive skills, ability to solve problems. Tu pun ability to solve problem is just looking at the cognitive aspect, not really on how they solve the problem, but just make sure that they got the right answer. So because you are looking at a specific kind of answer, you do not need rubric. Don't waste time doing the rubric. Waste a lot of time thinking what kind of answer that you're expecting from the question that you have set. Yeah, so you need an answer key. Is that it? Any more?
Last question below.
Is it a good practice to assess students' cognitive level couple or triple of topics in a quiz because students prefer this way? Or cover many topics in the midterm even though students not prefer this way? Tak faham. What is this question?
Assess student cognitive level couple or
Because when you want to do your exam, even if it's midterm or final exam, you will have JSU kan? You will have jadual spesifikasi item ataupun dulu dia panggil jadual spesifikasi ujian. You will have your weightage, right? For certain CLO, berapa weightage dia? So contoh, if I have 4 CLOs, my weightage means the amount of time that I spend on CLO1 is 20% of the total 100%. CLO2 20%, CLO3 40%, 30%, CLO4 30%. So it's all 100%, right? So when I am actually doing my question, that means, and then remember I told you the CLO is actually connected to the topic. So CLO1 is probably connected to topic 1 until 3, CLO2 topic 2 until 5. So there ada perpilihan dekat situ. So once you already have all those kind of topics, you will know when I say CLO1 to measure apa level dia tu, level dia katalah ability to identify. So you boleh cari ke cara-cara untuk mereka identify beberapa topik yang related kepada CLO1, tapi in total kalau you ada 100 soalan, 20 soalan saja daripada topik-topik berkenaan. Sebab weightage dia 20. Kalau you ada 100. Maksudnya kalau you ada 20 soalan, 20% of the 20 soalan lah. Or 30% of the 20 soalan. Itu maksudnya. Nak tahu the number of items. Tapi item tu pula topik apa? Yang tu relate back to your syllabus lah. That CLO was connected to which topic? Itu maksud dia. Okay, I know lah. Dulu kini dan selamanya kita ikut suka hati je kan. Ada 20 soalan. Startlah cari soalan-soalan apa yang nak tanya. Tapi sebenarnya dia punya prosedur dia tu untuk nak tanya soalan apa yang sepatutnya kita tanya berdasarkan kepada syllabus kita. Sebab syllabus kita dah ada dia punya learning outcome. So we have to follow the learning outcome. It is already designed in such a manner. So meaning if you feel that your syllabus is not well designed, sebab tu lah bila semak curriculum tu kena buat betul-betul. Bukannya hanya buat main-main. Sebab bila kita nak assess nanti, kita terikat kepada syllabus yang kita dah buat asalnya. Okay?
Okay.
I will send the slide to Urus Sekian nanti. Yeah? Don't worry about the slide. I just hope everybody understand though.
Yes.
So that is more important than the slides, I think. If you have any final questions, kalau tak ada, then have I answered all the questions?
Yeah, I think all the questions.
Yeah, alhamdulillah.
We covered.
Alhamdulillah.
Any last word from you, summary or anything before we close?
I think very good questions that I got from everybody here, and I think I pointed out all the things that I totally forgot to mention, especially the part where if you are teaching more than one person for the same course, yeah, you got to make sure that everybody is on board, everybody agrees on the same assessment, everybody understands what is it going to be assessed. You can never forget that CLO is very important, that you must understand the CLO before you understand the topic, because the topic is connected to the CLO, and it's from there that you will know what kind of questions and what kind of characteristics and what kind of criteria that you would need, and what kind of tasks that you would need to help your students. Yeah. Okay. So all the best. Enjoy yourself doing your own rubric. Don't go and take it from other people because they don't know what you're doing. You know best what you are doing, so you should be able to do on your own. Start small. If you think that it's too overwhelming, start with what you think is feasible for you. If you want to start with holistic, okay, fine, do holistic. But remember, don't forget the CLO, and then maybe you want to venture into other types of rubric, kinds of rubric. So for me, thank you very much for your time, for your presence, although virtually. Yes, Ramadan Mubarak. Selamat berbuka puasa, and whatever yang hilap tu, saya mohon maaf. Dan semoga apa yang di-share tadi ini bermanfaat. And thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Oh yes, yeah.
I think it's
Yes.
Irene. I just want to ask you, where can we access your PowerPoint slide and the recording?
I will pass it to Dr. Shah
So
for
it will
it.
be up to us through email, is it?
No.
No, no.
I have mentioned earlier, we will post inside our Facebook, and also the video will be available under our YouTube channel, UMT Remote Learning.
All right, thank you.
No problem.
So thank you very much, Dr. Fauziah, for your sharing. It's very
Thank
informative.
Alhamdulillah.
We have covered the various types of rubric, the process of developing rubric, and the most important thing, in which the rubrics really assist the development and student learning. And I would like just to point out a little bit the one that you highlighted. Yes, most important thing when we are developing, the CLO is our pillar. To make sure that definitely is our pillar. And as you pointed out just now, once we have started, maybe you can test through our formative assessment first, in which to test whether the student are able to understand the rubrics, or we are doing the right rubrics or not. And lastly, I would like to thank you again, Dr. Fauziah, for sharing this session. And we would like to thank you. Alhamdulillah, we have more than 200 participants today, with coming from more than 10 universities.
Alhamdulillah.
UMS, UKM, UPM, UIA, UMK, UMP, USM, UTHN, and UPSI, apart from UMT. So it is indeed a very fruitful, with a lot of questions being asked. And I would like to promote one thing. After this, since we have a session with Dr. Fauziah on rubric, next week on the 18th, we will have another session on development and validating your rubric. This will be conducted by Dr. Adibah from UTM. So it will be done on the 18th at 2:30 to 4:30 a.m. So 2 p.m. Sorry. So we will post any update in our Pusat Pembangunan Bakat dan Inovasi Facebook, and you can see our update over there. And with this, again, thank you very much, Dr. Fauziah. Thank you to all participants. Selamat berpuasa and selamat berbuka puasa to all of you. And we would like to apologize for any shortcomings. Inshallah, we'll meet again. So again, Dr. Fauziah, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Assalamualaikum, and good day, everyone.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you. Bye, everybody.